Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, fascinating journey into one of the most concentrated, mind-bending philosophical works ever written. We're talking about Fyodor Dostoevsky's 1877 short story, The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. You know, the Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin actually called this little story a complete encyclopedia of Dostoevsky's most important themes. So let's jump right in, because in just a handful of pages, Dostoevsky manages to wrestle with some massive concepts: alienation, the search for truth, human corruption, and the really profound hope of redemption.
So what happens when a person truly, deeply believes that absolutely nothing in the entire universe matters? Well, it's a question that seriously plagues a lot of modern minds, often leading to this crushing sense of alienation and isolation. But Dostoevsky was exploring this dark abyss of utter indifference well over a century ago. Through his unnamed protagonist, he gives us a guy who has hit the absolute logical endpoint of a purely rational, cynical worldview. I mean, what does your life even look like when every single value has been completely stripped away?
To really wrap our heads around a protagonist's starting point, we've got to look at the crushing weight of active nihilism. This is the depressive philosophy that's led him to total isolation. He's basically concluded that life is entirely useless. He's swapped out human feeling for pure, cold intellect and belief for complete skepticism. And because he believes nothing matters at all, he makes a pretty absolute decision. He's going to end his life. He even bought a revolver a couple of months ago, and he's literally just been sitting around waiting for the right moment to use it.
Section 1. Descent into absolute indifference.
So we meet the ridiculous man in this state of utter despair, completely marginalized from a society that basically just mocks him as a madman. But he doesn't even care about their mocking anymore because he's fully embraced the void. Picture this. It's a dismal, dark November night in St. Petersburg. Our protagonist looks up at the sky and spots this tiny, solitary, shining star. And that one little point of light, it triggers this chilling realization that finalizes his whole plan. He decides that tonight is the night. He's going to take that revolver out of his drawer and end it. For him, the physical existence of the universe just provides absolutely zero meaning.
But then, as he's walking home, something totally unexpected happens. He bumps into a desperate, terrified little 8-year-old girl. She's soaking wet from the rain, begging him to help her dying mother. Now, because he's already decided he's going to die in a few hours, he acts incredibly cruel. He turns her away, even stomping his foot just to scare her. But right here is the absolute crux of the story. As he's sitting in his armchair later with that loaded gun, he just can't stop thinking about her. He feels pity. He feels shame. That brief encounter basically plants this undeniable, super irritating seed of human emotion right into his cold mind. He starts wondering, if nothing matters, why on earth do I feel so guilty about this kid? And it's exactly this lingering empathy that delays his suicide, and instead, he nods off to sleep.
Section 2. Vision of Utopian Paradise.
Falling asleep in that armchair, he experiences a massive revelation. It's not a waking thought, but an incredibly profound dream. In the dream, he actually does pull the trigger, but crucially, he shoots himself right in the feeling heart instead of his rational head. And this is key because for Dostoevsky, the heart, not the intellect, is the true organ of spiritual knowledge. Anyway, after his dream death, a dark companion transports him across space to a twin Earth. It's this utopian golden age, totally bathed in bright sunlight. Dostoevsky was actually really inspired here by classical paintings of paradise like Claude Lorrain's harmonious landscapes. This twin Earth is filled with sinless, beautiful people who live in this joyous, spontaneous unity with nature and with each other. They don't have our modern science or complex laws, mainly because they just don't need them. Their lives are already perfectly whole.
And right here, we witness a really stunning paradox. The ridiculous man's earthly mindset, that cold, isolated rationality and active nihilism we talked about, is completely shattered. He is suddenly confronted by this brand new reality of profound emotional connection, optimistic faith, and total, selfless brotherhood. He is just intoxicated by their pure, unselfish love. It hits him that a life of true harmony is actually possible, completely overturning his old, cynical belief that human existence is just inherently meaningless and corrupt.
Section 3. The depravity of the heart.
But because our protagonist still carries the psychological contagion of our fallen earthly world right inside his soul, tragedy strikes. He ends up infecting these innocent children of the sun with a single devastating lie. It's wild, because this massive cascade of human corruption starts so innocently. Just a joke, a tiny deception. But that germ worms its way into their hearts, and they actually start to appreciate the beauty of a lie. Before you know it, sensuality, jealousy, and pride emerge. Blood gets shed. They break apart and form factions. And as they lose that natural harmony they had, they invent science and reason to try and artificially build it back. They literally start fighting entire wars just to force mutual understanding upon one another. It totally mirrors humanity's own tragic shift from innocent harmony into bloody divided conflict.
As they lose all that spontaneous joy, they replace it with the sterile comfort of logic. They start declaring that knowledge is somehow higher than feeling and that the consciousness of life is higher than life itself. They falsely convince themselves that intellectually discovering the laws of happiness through science is way better than, just actually being happy. It's Dostoevsky's direct, biting critique of purely rationalist and utilitarian philosophies that just strip away the spiritual essence of humanity.
Section 4. Transformation through the truth.
As the dream totally collapses into suffering and war, the ridiculous man is just overwhelmed with guilt. He actually begs them to crucify him for bringing all this sin into their perfect world. And right in the middle of this intense anguish, he wakes up. He's back in his armchair, staring at his loaded revolver, but he is fundamentally transformed by what he's just seen. Dostoevsky weaves some really deep Christian symbolism throughout this whole awakening. Think about it. In the dream, while he's lying in his grave, a steady drip of water falls on his closed eye, which acts as this metaphorical baptism into a new life. That shining star he saw earlier, it acts a lot like the Star of Bethlehem, heralding a massive revelation. He wakes up with what Dostoevsky calls a living image icon, or an obraz in Russian, permanently etched into his soul. It's a profound, untouchable vision of truth. It is the absolute triumph of the feeling heart over the cynical head.
Now, this intense psychological metamorphosis maps perfectly onto Dostoevsky's broader three-stage theory of societal evolution. Stage 1 is that innocent, spontaneous living we saw at the start on the Twin Earth. Stage 2 is the bitter fall into conscious individualism, science, and corruption. But Stage 3, which our protagonist has finally reached upon waking up, is a highly conscious, deliberate return to selfless love. The big takeaway here? You can't unknow the pain and brokenness of the world, but you can consciously choose to love anyway.
Section 5. Preacher of Absurd Hope.
Awakening to this amazing realization, the ridiculous man instantly pushes the revolver away. He completely rejects physical suicide, but he also rejects the philosophical suicide of nihilism. Instead, he fully embraces a brand new identity. He becomes what the Russian tradition calls a fool for Christ, basically someone who holds a living, radiant truth inside them, even if the entire rest of the world thinks they've lost their mind. Academics actually often relate this final state to Albert Camus' concept of absurdism, or optimistic nihilism. He knows all the intellectual arguments of the void. He knows for a fact the world is broken, corrupt, and full of suffering. And yet, he defiantly chooses to strive for meaning, love, and life regardless. He takes on the ridiculous, radiant burden of radical love, totally aware that earthly perfection might never happen, but committing to the effort anyway.
He makes this incredibly powerful declaration, fully accepting the mockery of society. They can call it a hallucination or a silly dream, it doesn't matter to him in the slightest. The living image icon of truth has filled his soul forever. He is compelled to go out and preach brotherhood and selfless love, regardless of the odds. Just having that vision of what humanity could be is enough to sustain him, even if a literal heaven on earth is never fully realized.
And what's great is that Dostoevsky doesn't just leave us hanging with abstract preaching. In a really beautiful, concrete application of this huge existential awakening, the story ends with immediate action. The ridiculous man resolves right then and there to go find and help the very same little girl he abandoned in the rain just hours before. His grand philosophical transformation instantly translates into practical, everyday compassion. He's stepping back into the real world to heal the exact same pain he once ignored.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider Dostoevsky's timeless challenge for a second. It is so easy to retreat into the safety of cynicism, isn't it? To intellectualize our isolation and just claim that nothing really matters. But Dostoevsky dares us to abandon that comforting indifference. He's asking us, do we have the courage to be seen as absolutely ridiculous in the eyes of a cynical world simply because we choose to bear the heavy burden of radical, transformative love? It's literally a choice between the death of the soul and the vibrant, painful, beautiful reality of human connection. So which one will you choose?